Welcome to the 308th episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Welcome, and thank you for listening. Well, on Wednesday, Addie Meinerich and I completed our third Zoom conference on summertime fun foods. We pulled it off. We went back and forth 4 different times with 4 different entrees. We started out with carrot dogs and baked beans. We did a pasta salad, a kale lentil rice salad. We did a beet burger. We did a bean burger. We did brown bean brownies, black bean brownies, and a lemon tart, and back and forth, and talked about the nutritional aspects of that. And what actually hit me during that talk and as we were preparing for it was not that what we made was healthy, but the shift between how unhealthy traditional summer food is and how healthy it could be is amazing. If you take, hot dogs, for instance, the salt, the carcinogens associated with the nitrosamines, the fat, the cholesterol, and then you look at the anti-cancer properties of carrots and sourdough bread and the probiotics associated with sauerkraut and the nitric oxide potential in beets and kale, and the nutrients in a colorful pasta salad without the mayo, without the fat, without the cholesterol, without the eggs. It is an amazing shift that you can make and still have a great time. And I hear it all the time. People say, oh, I don't eat that very often, or we only eat this once in a while, and we only pig out once in a while, and for the most part, we're low carb, and we avoid sugar, or we avoid fat, But then when you start talking to people, it's more than just a little bit. It's something bad but different every day. And when I say bad, maybe it's not horrible, but it's the associated toxicities of some of the ingredients, the metabolic waste associated with it, the oils associated with it, and the lack of health promotion that's associated with it. It's not just that we eat bad things, it's that we miss the opportunity to eat good things and actually make ourselves healthier. Because if we go by what Hippocrates says, let food be thy medicine, and exercise is one of the best pills that we can get. When we don't do it, it's opposite of not just taking in something bad or being sedentary, but we're missing the opportunity to actually gain health. In our weekly nutrition classes, we do 2, one on Mondays and one on Friday. I prepare some dish, and I try to make it something that's not ordinary or something that people would like to try or could share with their families. For instance, today we did hearts of palm calamari. Or again, a lentil kale rice salad or a version on a pasta salad. But we do different dishes. And part of that is to challenge the people in the class to think how they could make their food more healthy and to give them the confidence to prepare healthy food for their families. But the other thing that we do is we talk about mobility and movement and exercise and how that will make us more likely to retain muscle mass, retain flexibility, to retain stability over time. And we talk about the science behind the food so that perhaps when they're asked questions by people that aren't plant-based, since about 95% of the world or greater isn't plant-based predominantly, that they can answer the questions intelligently and have an argument that makes them feel good. I'm not an advocate of going into a room and telling people how they should eat, but I do want to be able to defend my choices or support what I do with good factual knowledge and be confident in what I eat is going to make me healthy and confident in what I suggest other people is going to make them healthy and know the science behind it. So I want to teach that to the people in our classes as well. But sometimes I got to tell you that I'm not sure how much people really want to know. I know sometimes I geek out on science too much and get too nitty-gritty detail on the biochemistry of something, or perhaps maybe push people into movements and exercises that they don't have any desire to do. And it comes a fine line of what do I present and, where do I draw the line? And, it's my thought that I should always push people outside of their comfort zone. But just like anything, you can push people too far outside of their zone and they completely shut down or don't want to do it at all. So there's a fine line between educating people and challenging them and turning them off. After all, we're all different and we all have different objectives and goals that we would like to meet. And, I can't necessarily always put my desires on people, and I'm probably an outlier when it comes to what I want to do as far as my movement and mobility. I always think of myself being younger and wanting to do things at an advanced age that continues to keep me mobility. I'm not willing to give a lot of things up just because I'm getting older. But as I look around at my extended family and see how they've lived their lives into older age, and if you look around in the airport and you look around at restaurants, there's a lot of things that I don't hold in common with people. There's a lot of people that are happy riding the trams or the push carts all the way to the airport ramp and getting on the plane seat and having their fast food and getting off and having somebody wheel them and their bags to the taxi or the bus station and being picked up and going. I remember when I was younger and we would have family reunions in the summertime. The kids would play and the adults would sit and eat meal number one and sit around and talk about the old times and then eat meal number two, and then everybody would finally clean up and go home, and that was about the size of it. There were a few of the adults that would participate, mainly the younger adults that would participate in some pickup games with, us kids, but for the most part, the adults sat around and the kids played and did their thing, and there wasn't much interaction. I also remember going to our cottage when I was young, and my mom cross-country skied, and there was a family that lived nearby that had a volleyball court, and we would play volleyball for hours on end. And the age range of those volleyball games on the weekend would range from 7 to 75. And the 75-year-olds were as active and as aggressive as the 20 or 30-some years old. So there was a wide variation in what people do. When Addie got married and we had a flash mob and we got my dancing teacher from when I was a child to help us out in our routine, she was still quite active dancing and she could still do a split. So there's a wide variation of what people want to do or seem possible. And I think that, what I want to, explain or encourage in people is that to be able to do some of those things, it just doesn't happen. You have the genetics to do some of those things. You have to prepare for them. And the more we sit around and eat and don't do things, and, especially with COVID, it's really made a big change in people. People have been locked down, stuck in their houses, not going outside, not exercising, getting food delivered to them, gaining weight, not doing much in the way of outdoor activities or exercising. In some instances, people are going out and doing those things and using COVID as a reason to go places as far as, trails and outdoor activities. But for the most part, I think there's a huge lockdown and isolation. And I suspect that there's been a big decline in people since the lockdown as far as, one, their desire to go and push themselves, and a new comfort level with getting things delivered and eating around the TV and not going and getting groceries and carrying them in and not doing a lot of meal prep. So I think that the potential there is we've lost a lot And the question comes now that the restrictions are being lifted, and there are a lot of people that are flooding national parks and wanting to take their families, younger people, and I think that's just a fabulous sign that some of the nation's national parks are just overwhelmed with people. I think that's just fabulous. We finally realize that we can get back, outdoors, and seeing what our great country has to offer outside is something that, would be a blessing to happen from COVID. But how many people are not really prepared for that now that they've been cooped up inside? And how are they going to go about, the nutrition associated with eating and training for those things? I've also heard that a lot of people haven't been getting regular checkups, and not that I'm a huge fan of regular checkups, but when people are not in good health and they're not taking their medicine and they're not getting patched up like they were before, then there's an associated decline as well. And that's when we turn to the quick fix. So people want a quick fix weight loss diet that's going to get them ready to, do all the activities that they haven't been doing. And that's where I hear the ketogenic diet or restricted carbohydrate diets coming in. Roughly 33% of the population has either pre-diabetes or diabetes, meaning that they can't metabolize carbohydrates appropriately. They have a metabolic disease. And that metabolic disease is at the mitochondrial level. And, the real mechanism of diabetes is that we can't get glucose to where it needs to be processed into energy because fat is blocking the uptake. But carbs are blamed, carbs are blamed, carbs are blamed. But people that get adult onset diabetes, for the most part, are overweight, and they have an excessive accumulation of metabolic waste that's blocking the uptake, and is predominantly in the form of fat blocking the uptake of glucose. So when people turn to a ketogenic diet, they're saying, well, it's easy when we eat a low carbohydrate diet and we measure our glucose, it's good. And if you do it for 3 months, then your hemoglobin A1C will drop like a rock. But the side effect of that is that their lipid panel typically goes through the roof. The cholesterols go through the roof. The triglycerides may go through the roof. But even more importantly, as it is being determined, there is a research, Dr. Milan at the University of Colorado, that actually looked at Dexa scans, and people on a carbohydrate-restricted diet, ketogenic high-fat diet, actually gain fat mass and lose muscle mass. So over time, if the mechanism for diabetes is fat blocking the uptake of glucose, when you lose muscle mass and gain fat mass, you're making that condition worse. And I saw a reference today, somebody was talking about just what is a carbohydrate-restricted diet. And not unlike the Mediterranean diet, it varies all over the place. When we say eat a plant-based diet, we mean don't eat animals, just eat plants. And it can be any kind of a plant. It can be a grain, it can be a fruit, it can be a vegetable. It's pretty easy. And what you don't eat are animal products. And it's pretty clear. It's not a 20 grams of this or 30 grams of this. It's we don't eat animal products. But with a carbohydrate-restricted diet, a lot of people put different names on it. And basically because it's so difficult to maintain, because it's so restrictive, then people have to make different rules so they can tolerate it. So a kind of modest carbohydrate-restricted diet that you'll lose some weight, but you can still have some fruits and vegetables, is 100 to 150 grams carbohydrate. Well, what does that mean? Well, there are 3.5 ounces roughly in 100 grams. So there's 16 ounces in a pound. And if you just looked at spinach, 1 cup of spinach is about 1.1 ounce. So if you get 3.5 to, say, 6 ounces of carbohydrates, then that's not a whole lot of vegetables. People on low restricted carbohydrates say, oh, you get plenty of fruits and vegetables, and that's one of the most liberal, 100 to 150, but it's still not. It's certainly not 6 cups of nitric oxide producing greens a day. It's certainly not a colorful plate of bright, different colors of fruit and watermelon and so forth. So that becomes very restrictive. And then if you actually take it down for more weight loss, now we're back down to 50 to 100 grams of carbohydrate total a day. And then a true ketogenic diet to enter ketosis is less than 50 grams of carbohydrate a day. So that takes it down to, greens, some kale, and low glycemic fruit such as berries, strawberries, a few blueberries here and there. So that is extremely restrictive, and it kind of then people start to do a different take on it as far as we'll do a targeted ketogenic diet, so you can have a small amount of carbohydrates around workouts. So if you work out 3 times a week, then we're going to let your carbohydrates slip up. There's no athlete that wants to perform at a high level that can eat a ketogenic diet. They may train so that they can use better fat, but there's no athlete that's going to perform on a professional level eating fat because they can't get enough ATP or they can't get enough energy quick enough. You need glucose and carbohydrate for that. So it's not meant for someone that does an explosive activity, a Tour de France rider or a sprinter or a swimmer, short regular distance swimmer, to compete. You can't do that on a ketogenic diet. So they have to have some carbs around their exercise. And that kind of should tell you something right there. If you can't do your activities of daily living eating a particular way, then perhaps it's not the right way to eat. And then there is the cyclic ketogenic diet, which you do ketosis most days, or ketotic diet, less than 50 grams. But then you have cheat days of high carbohydrate for, a couple days a month or a couple weeks at a time, depending on the rules of all this. So what does that actually do to you? Well, you're on the ketogenic diet and if you're eating low carbohydrates and low fruits and vegetables, you're eating low fiber, which leads to constipation, which leads to a change in your microbiome for bacteria that are more able to handle decaying material, more inflammatory. So you're doing this, back and forth with your microbiome. You're not getting the phytonutrients and the antioxidants that you're supposed to be getting. So we're setting ourselves up for all kinds of this balance of, first we're ketogenic, then we're eating carbohydrates, and it's really a setup. How are we going to get our nutrients to try to protect ourselves from cancer? How are we going to reverse heart disease if we're not getting our nitric oxide producing greens on a regular basis? And again, back to performance. How are you going to perform if there's, and that can be mental performing as well, because our brain really wants carbohydrates, specifically glucose. It will run on lactate, but we need some form of glucose to operate our brain. So it's really hard for me to understand why anybody would want to do this other than to lose weight. There is a thing called intermittent fasting that people eat, they eat a lot of fat. And I understand people can eat fat and they're full, the butter coffee or whatever, and they're eating these high fats, so they're full and they lose weight. But again, at the same time, they're, becoming inflamed, and people will do the restricted eating, and it's like, okay, well, you can take branch-chain amino acid, and that helps you not to get hungry as well. But we know that branch-chain amino acid actually upregulate mTOR, which is a enzyme of aging, an enzyme associated with increased risk of cancer. People with breast cancer, prostate cancer, people with dementia have high levels of mTOR. So it's not something we want in the long term. So the question, are you willing to sacrifice in the short term to lose the long term? And I guess, unfortunately, human nature as it is, we want what we want it now, and we don't save for the future or look to the future. But I think that when it comes to our health, we have to kind of look at the end game. How do you want the last years of your life? How do you want the last 20 or 30 years of your life to be as far as your overall health? We're really good at patching things up. I heard a patient of another cardiologist in town this week that he said he proudly boasted that he had 13 stents. And that particular cardiologist I know has told people, don't worry about your nutrition, I can just put another stent in. Well, you have 3 main arteries and then you have some branches. So the fact that the guy got 13 stents in somehow is pretty much stacking one stent on top of each other. In the cardiology world, we call that a full metal jacket because the vessels are just chucked full of these little stents to try to hold them open. That usually doesn't lead to much in the way of quality of life. It leads to being able to sit in a chair and go out to dinner and, I guess, eat what you want and go home and sit in a chair and watch TV and then put your CPAP mask on. But it comes back to what do you really want the quality of your life to be, and what do what have you dialed it back? What are you willing to accept? I had a traditional cardiology practice until about a little over 3 years ago. And I had a lot of elderly patients that we kept alive a long time that didn't eat very well, and they ate little bits. And you can look at a typical assisted living patient for the most part and see that. They're given comfort foods, so soft foods, low fiber, high sugar, high fat. But as long as they're not, and maybe they eat little bits of it, maybe they eat a lot, but as long as they're not moving much, they're sitting in a chair, going in their wheelchair to go to the doctor's office, going to get food, coming back, going to dinner, coming back, then they can survive quite a long time on medications to keep their blood pressure down and medications to try to regulate their cholesterol and medications to help them sleep and a CPAP machine to help them breathe. And ultimately, a lot of them require joint replacements from the sedentary behavior and loss of muscle mass. And most of the time what gets people, if it's not heart failure, it's falling and not being able to recover from it. So that's the choice that we need to think about when we're accepting or not accepting some of the challenges that are put forth to us. So, food for thought. Again, when I look at who is my target audience, who really wants to take the challenge to reverse things, and I'm quite encouraged by a lot of people that they really want to push themselves. We have people. My 85-year-old patient is going to train for a marathon in January. We have our late 70 years old gentleman who's training for his marathon. He's race walking. He's actually looking at techniques and different videos on how to get his technique just down. We have people out climbing mountains, people that are training for Ironman races, people that are doing marathons and different triathlon races. So I'm very encouraged for people that are continuing to challenge, and I hope that they stand out enough to be able to say, yeah, the bar doesn't have to be low. It doesn't have to be spend your 60s and 70s and 80s in a chair and going to doctor's office. But I will guarantee that if if people don't make this shift from these high-fat foods, high cholesterol food, high carcinogenic foods to more healthy foods, it's not going to happen. This week, there have been a couple studies that come out. One, it's been out for a while that we're recommending colon cancer screening starts in the 40s as opposed to in the 50s. Nobody's saying don't eat hot dogs and processed meat and red meat and exercise and stay lean and eat lots of fiber so you can get your gut micro. I'm not saying that. They're just saying get a colonoscopy or do a Cologuard test. And I think that's a terrible, terrible thing to put off to people, that if we just find these things early, then things will be okay. It's not. There was another study that came out this week that looked at people that have their first angioplasty. The majority of those people have modifiable risk factors. Well, that's a crazy thing to think, that somebody thought that was amazing, that they didn't have modifiable risk factors. But that doesn't mean anybody's doing anything about it. Like my colleague in town is just saying, well, yeah, you have risk factors, you can take these pills, and then we'll put another stent in. But there's alternatives to that. And, some people have to be more aggressive than others. But I think that, again, this shift, that from terrible food to healthy food, there's this huge advantage, not just taking a few bad things out, but putting the good things in. And to look away from, I just do that once in a while, till I do this all the time. I think that should be the focus. This is what my focus is. I try all the time to eat healthy, and I look at things and I'm mindful to say, is this going to make me more healthy, or is this the potential to make me less healthy? And is that something that I'm willing to choose to do for a short-term gain? I think the other thing that is not being told to patients is, like, take your diabetic medications, and if your hemoglobin A1C is, controlled, less than 6.5, then everything's going to be okay. But none of that has ever been shown to decrease the secondary side effects of diabetes, such as heart disease, vascular disease, blindness, kidney disease. But more than that, the functional capacity of a diabetic, and again, remember, 33% of the population is either pre or diabetic, and that's the same amount of people that all have this energy problem, this mitochondrial dysfunction, that they can't adequately use glucose. And when Dr. Milan looked at a group of diabetics, a group of cyclists, and a group of professional cyclists, and a group of fit individuals. And what he noted was that, cyclists are some of the fittest people on earth, professional cyclists. They ride for long periods of time at a high level. And they were able to achieve a power output in this particular study of 320 to 360 watts before they started to accumulate lactic acid and, what we call an anaerobic threshold. Fit people were down to 150 to 170 watts that they could sustain. And diabetics were all the way down to 80 to 100 watts. And when you're looking at power output, 80 to 100 watts. So basically, when a diabetic would go out for a casual ride, they were already exceeding their mitochondrial's ability to utilize carbohydrate or to utilize fat, and they were burning only carbohydrate. And so to be able to go out and enjoy yourself for extended periods of time, we have to change the metabolic function of the mitochondria. And that comes with not only training, but changing body composition. And, I stress that to my diabetics all the time, that, again, in mitochondrial dysfunction not only affects the diabetic, but then we start to see the risk factor for cancer, the risk factor for dementia, because, again, we're trying to process fat, process carbohydrate, process and use energy. So, one of the things that we're having people do is to, train long and slow. And we want people to be able to do this level 2 or zone 2 exercise for prolonged periods of time so that they can start to train their mitochondria to be able to use fat instead of glucose. The other thing that we want is strength training so that we can maintain muscle mass. And again, that's another reason to avoid the ketogenic diet. We don't want to lose muscle mass. We lose it anyway as we age. But if you're doing a basically starvation diet, you're going to lose the muscle mass unless you're doing some significant strength training. So we want people to strength train and maintain their mobility, their posture, their stability, and maintain this mitochondrial function by maintaining muscle mass. So, again, comes back to summertime and out for summertime fun. And people say, no, it's just going to be summer and we're just going to do this once in a while and we're just going to have this once in a while. Keep a log. It's not just once in a while. It's a little bit of something all the time. I just went over a certain takeout restaurant, a soup that they had, over a gram of salt for just, a small portion of soup. That's that salt accumulation, the fat accumulation that when you go out, and eat, even if it's once in a while and it's a different restaurant, it really adds up over time. So I hope that you can enjoy some of our summertime food, plant-based foods, and maintain that look for the color in your plate all summer long. As you know, summertime is my favorite fruit time of the year because it is mango season, and part of my running right now is going and taking my hydration vest and going to the neighbors where I'm allowed to pick mangoes and getting 2 or 3 mangoes and bringing back every morning. So I'm enjoying different varieties of mangoes every day. Our papaya trees have papayas. Cherry season is all over the United States. Watermelons, cantaloupes, honeydews. So there's a variety of different fruits that are available now. So try some different varieties of fruit and, increase your fruit for breakfast. It's a great way to get going and a great way to get your energy started. So enjoy healthy summertime food. And if you want some help, go on over to drdulaney.com, DOCTORDULANEY. And you can find out how you can become a member of our practice and learn how to eat healthy, learn how to move healthy, and figure out what you can train for, even if it's training to be 80 or 90 and moving. And, don't be pressured into eating unhealthy food during your summer vacations or your summer picnics or reunion. And take the time to shine. Show your family and friends just how great it is to eat plant-based and colorful, and show them some of the colorful dishes that are out there that you can make and how good they feel. And lead by example, by looking good and moving good. And, so enjoy your summer and enjoy it healthy. Having a good time doesn't mean that you have to succumb to junk foods and unhealthy lifestyles. So get out there and be healthy. Get some fresh air, sunshine. Move your body, sweat a little bit, and push the envelope as far as your plant-based nutrition choices. Thanks for listening. Oh, and don't forget, if you're looking for some good coffee, go over to groundsandhounds.com. Get some fresh coffee sent to you. Use the code Sophie Says. Get some discounts. Again, thanks for listening.